Welcome all to the SDK Community Dev Call, October 2021 edition. Today, we are going to go over the recent SDK releases at a high level and just make sure folks are aware of the stuff that's been coming out from the team. And then we'll talk a little bit about where things are at in terms of the working groups that we have in progress and the active feature development that's going on, and do a bit of a highlighted showcase of some of the work going on with the new protobuf code generator that we've been developing in-house and with some collaborators at AIB and other folks in the ecosystem. So the first release that we've done since the last time we all spoke was the 04210 release. This is a backport release to the 042 line. It included an important IBC fix that, as folks are maybe aware or remember, the 042 series actually has the IBC module built into the SDK. From 043 forward, IBC is a separate repository, a separate module, and go mod entirely. So when the IBC had a fix that they had to implement, that was needed to be backported to this. And there were a few other improvements that were put into this release as well. Some improvements to ABCI performance via Tendermint 03413, some performance improvements for Cache KV store, and a bump of IAVL. Then on the 044 series, which is the more recent kind of feature development release line that we've had, which includes OBZ and fee grant. We did a point release of that, which had a pretty important bug fix that had a non-deterministic or some non-determinism in the upgrade process from 042 chain. So if you were or are wanting to migrate from a 042 chain to an 044 chain, it's important that you're at least using this version to avoid that non-determinism bug. And then the similar set of other improvements that made it into the 04210 release were also, a number of them were also in here as well, in addition to some CLI fixes. 044.2 came shortly after that. That had a bug fix of a high severity security issue that could result in a consensus chain halt. We did a security advisor for this. It was called Security Advisory Jackfruit. You can read about that on the Cosmos Hub forum post that was published on October 12th. That has a full disclosure of exactly what the vulnerability was. The patch was in this release, and nodes can update their software independently of each other. So no coordinated chain restart is necessary. So for anyone on the 044 line, it's important to circulate this information widely about the security advisory Jackfruit, and that they should be running at least 044.2. And 044.3 is actually one that just came out, I think it was maybe 5 days ago or so. So as I had mentioned from one of the previous releases, there was a concurrency, an improved concurrency handling that was live in one of the more recent Tendermint upgrades. And with that, we've actually upgraded the way that gRPC queries work, which are now able to run concurrently when querying them directly through the gRPC server on the SDK. So previously, that wasn't the case. And as of the 044.3 release, and this was something that a lot of client chains had been asking about, we now have support for concurrent gRPC queries when connecting directly through the gRPC server. It's important that if you're wanting to make use of these, you do hit the gRPC server directly, because that's where the concurrency is happening, as opposed to using the Tendermint RPC ABCI query endpoint. And aside from that, there were a couple of other improvements that we put into the 044.3 release, bumping to the latest Tendermint version, bumping this Jonic dependency, which had an upstream security vulnerability, and also adding a null guard with a more user-friendly error message for nil amounts in transaction fee coins. Cosmovisor 1.0 saw its release as well since we last did this call. So this is now the first official release of Cosmovisor that supports a file watcher based upgrade as opposed to reading for chain halting status via standard out. It also supports auto download of binaries. This isn't really recommended as we don't have a lot of verification in place to ensure that the binary that you're downloading automatically is what you're wanting to actually run. And we do have an open issue for trying to add some more additional verification or validation that the auto downloaded binary, via checksums or similar, is what's intended. But that feature is there if folks are wanting to experiment with it or use it in an experimental capacity. And then also added help and version supplements to Cosmovisor. So what's next? The most high priority things, this is kind of changing week to week, but where our current, heads are at from the last internal SDK calls that we've been having on Fridays is that transaction tips, as well as finally getting merged into ADR 38 state listening support and some of the initial work on the govern group module alignment, in particular, governance's ability to have their proposal handlers migrated over to use standard SDK.messages would be features folded into the 045 release. And after that, what's looking like it would be an 046 or potentially our final big v1.0 of the SDK is where we're bucketing in a number of other changes. These may come iteratively. It may not be all of these. It may just be the first few that feel like they're real enablers for the rest. But we have our protobuf v2 code gen, which we'll be talking about today, the improved module wiring, which is going to drastically simplify how base app, how you construct a base app. NFT support, so the merging in of the SDK's NFT module that the Iris team has been doing work on, as well as staking improvements, SMT integration, ADR 33 app router, and potentially an off and bank refactor. In my own understanding, like the highest priority things that would probably make that cut for a v1.0, like as in blocking that release, would be the code gen, the improved module wiring, and then possibly some of the SMT work, as those are, I think, the largest, more infrastructural pieces that that we would want to designate like a major version for, and a lot of the others, I think, we would be folding in as like nice to have should they be able to get done in time. And so with that, yeah, we have Tyler on the call. And so I'd like to hand it over to him to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing with the protobuf code gen.
Thanks. So we've been working with a couple members of Tendermint to create a new code generator. It's built on top of protobuf's v2 code generator, and we are adding our own suite of plugins to make Cosmos devs' lives a little bit easier. The reason for doing this is because GoGo Proto is no longer being maintained, and that kind of came at the same time as Google announcing a new API. And this API exposed an interface for us to implement, which allows us to make way faster calls on top of proto messages. And this saw improvements in the range of like 10 to 100x speedups. And then on top of that, we are going to be adding more Cosmos focused features, one of which being more annotations for your proto files that are geared more towards Cosmos stuff, one of which would be being able to mark a field in your proto message definitions as a signer, and that will automatically generate your get signers message or get signers method. So you'll have less boilerplate code to implement. And then the next thing we're working on is getting rid of the clunky any type message. So you won't have to deal with unpack interfaces and dealing with any messages in a different way that you would other messages. And this is because interfaces aren't really like a first-class citizen in protocol buffers. So we're going to be moving more towards a handler type architecture. This might break some of your code, but it'll be coming in small releases at a time, so it won't completely destroy everything. But yeah, I think that's it.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, and so with that, that concludes the presentation portion of this call. I'll stop recording now and we can open it up for questions.